So yo, man, uh, I was gonna talk to Chat GPT this morning a little bit about Dianetics in the free zone. So I'm coming from a background of Christianity, like born and raised Christian. I spent a lot of time in my 20s trying to practice seated meditation, a little bit of yoga, some Buddhism mostly, which I think helped me out for a while. And then kind of got into yoga style thinking in my mid 20s, which I don't think it worked because if you're not born Hindu, you're going to have a really hard time just going around saying, "Yeah, I'm Hindu." It's almost like a cultural kind of racial, kind of born into thing. So, uh, I've also tried, see if I can get myself up. I've also tried studying the Quran to some extent, which I just kind of figured that I was not capable of Ramadan. I'm not capable of it. I'm a hungry bastard. So it does appear that Ramadan is pretty much necessary to practice Islam. So I don't think it's for me. But Dianetics is kind of up my alley. So I'll talk to you this morning about Freezone Dianetics. And I'm just gonna leave this up, talk a little bit. Why you would come to this place where you're beginning to consider like a religion based off science fiction is probably because you need help. You need help, not necessarily answers. So I've talked to people in the community before about religion and spirituality. Sometimes people are looking for answers. Other people are looking for like the social opportunity of engaging and stuff, which is, I'm gonna be honest, if you can go to a church every Sunday and feel welcome and take part in that, it is pretty nice. Now, what do if you can't get anything figured out and maybe your prayers are going unanswered and stuff? Is where I'm at. So, talking to Chat GPT about this morning because about 15, 20 years ago, there was a massive protest against the entire Scientology movement that mostly took place in Florida, I think. It kind of reached national level. To this day, there's still a lot of like Scientology protests in online communities. So, eh, kind of a weird thing. Kind of weird thing because I was talking to an auditor, so maybe last year, and she said there's a story where L. Ron Hubbard had to get on a boat pretty much in the middle of the ocean to work some of this stuff out, and even then a lot of his research and writing was almost suppressed by some high level people. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it's almost funny how a lot of, I think at the core of trying to help yourself out involves the self, yourself, things like that. So ChatGPT is saying that we did talk about Freezone Dianetics earlier. So Freezone is going to keep the core Dianetics model, which talks about reactive mind, engrams, and auditing. And it's going to reject any kind of centralized authority in that movement, mandatory belief, any kind of paywall. So within the free zone, I mean, you pretty much got a $15 copy of Dianetics online. You have Chat GPT. I'm not sure you're going to be successful talking about this in forums, but you might pick up some language or vocabulary for it. So free zone is going to be more open to hybridization, like psychology, meditation, mysticism, self-analysis. Big thing is this discovery by Elron was that your mind is pretty much in two modes, is reactive mind versus analytical mind, which hit me on a deep friggin' level. Like, this reactive mind mode is where you're operating on stimulus and response. You're operating from a place of stored, painful memories. You basically walk around like a bastard, unable to get along with people, unable to really enjoy life when you're by yourself. And talks about gaining clarity, usually through auditing. Usually, I think what people are doing is once they realize that their reactive mind is operating and destroying their life almost, they seek out an auditor to gain clarity and start operating within the analytical mind mode. Now, for me personally, in order to get out of this reactive mind, it don't take a whole lot. Almost the recognition that when I, especially getting up in the morning, and I've got to have water. I personally got to have some multivitamin and a moderate amount of coffee in order to exist as a human being. But at the same time, kind of spending some time reviewing some of the stuff on analytical mind tends to just put me in a better place of clarity. And I think that's where free zone worked for a lot of fucking people. You don't necessarily need an auditor. Now, it's going to talk about some stuff about reactive mind. This may come up in other systems like Old Self language and Christian theology, maybe some stuff in Hinduism and Buddhism, self-auditing. Now, there's one thing that I wanted to explore this morning. It's something I saw online, is that there seems to be a necessity for human beings to exercise a little bit as well as stabilize themselves. And yoga is pretty huge for a lot of people. But let's talk about how yoga thinking may not be correct in terms of Adi. Let's not get in terms of the fact that we live in the matter, energy, space, time universe and not some kind of hologram. It sounds crazy, but this is a big thing in yoga, and it's a big thing in neuroscience that this is almost like solipsism. Solipsism posits that a single human being is the only entity which exists in the entire universe, and that everything else there is just a projection of some kind of like mental thinking. And let's slow this down. What yoga thinking usually assumes when people talk about yoga philosophy today, especially in pop spiritual or neo Vedanta form, that's almost what I want to suggest through Shankar's thinking. As yoga thinking is that reality is fundamentally non-material. Matter itself is an illusion. That the physical world is either secondary, deceptive, or unreal. Or some yoga or Indian thinkers almost thought it was like a game or a dance of the mind. Yoga would say consciousness precedes physics, that bare awareness is the base layer, and that matter itself emerges from mind. And that kind of the goal of yoga is that the self is misidentified, that any form of individual identity is an error, and that it seeks liberation by dissolving the ego as well as identification with body, time, and causality. Now, that's yoga thinking, where when like I said, when I was given yoga lessons as part of my psychiatric treatment in my early to mid 20s, I was straying away from Christianity into Buddhism and then into Hinduism until I started really feeling rejected as someone who wanted to consider themselves to be Hindu. And then I found out that you actually kind of have to be from India and it's kind of almost royalty to be Hindu. I started studying about solipsism, and it just kind of threw me off. Now, Dianetics, like I said, is for someone who is perhaps so broken that they cannot figure anything out. They cannot figure anything out. And so this issue of consciousness and reality does come up. So we would say we live in the mist, which is the matter, energy, space, time. And it's a serious kind of thing if you've ever studied under a yogi or swami, or you practiced any kind of form of awareness training, or been hypnotized or brainwashed. You probably need to build yourself back up. The matter, energy, space, time, universe is real. It is serious. It is not a metaphor, but it's actual substrate of reality. And it breaks metaphysical claims from yoga. Matter is not an illusion. It has inertia, it resists intention, it obeys conservation laws. It will kill you if you ignore it. You cannot meditate gravity away. You cannot dissolve entropy with insight. You cannot wake up from thermodynamics. If matter were an illusion, engineering wouldn't work, medicine wouldn't work, starvation wouldn't work, but they do. This suggests matter is ontologically real, not a projection. And that's just a mist. But B, consciousness appears inside the system, not above it. Neuroscience, physics, and biology all point to consciousness correlates with energy states and matter. Damaged matter, consciousness degrades. So if you hurt your brain, you're not going to be as conscious. That does line up with medicine. So they are able to grade your level of consciousness if you were to get really, really sick and go to the hospital. And that perhaps is related to damage to your brain. If you alter chemistry, your perception shifts. This does not explain consciousness fully, but it locates it. It is an emergent process, not a cosmic author like yoga posits. Okay. C, time is not an illusion. It has teeth. So time in the mist has direction, leaves irreversible traces, accumulates damage, produces history, whereas yoga claims time is a veil. Okay, now this was the main problem I wanted to talk ChatGPT about this morning, is that all this stuff is out there, like the singularity, human computer brain interfaces, virtual reality is out there, and there's almost a philosophy and spirituality connected to that, where people are talking about a holographic universe. They're saying you just live in a hologram already. Why not live your life through virtual reality? That's what they're saying. The hologram problem is very modern. And it says, physics says reality is a hologram, therefore ancient yogis were right. Nope. This is a category error. The holographic principle does not mean nothing is real. Holographic refers to information encoding, not to reality being fake or mental. Still presupposes energy, geometry, causality, and boundary conditions. But where does yoga thinking go wrong? Yoga mistakes subjective phenomena. You know what? I don't understand that. Subjective phenomenology for cosmology. Meditation can dissolve ego, can quiet narrative identity, can reduce suffering, but altering perception does not equal altering the universe. It may be good for nervous system training, but may be good for regulating your attention or whatnot. But it is going to dissolve your ego and your concept of self, as well as the identity you have built over the course of your life. And which is where I have a problem. I may have a need to be selfish or self-centered. I may have a need to conserve my own resources and finances, establish autonomy and boundaries. So I don't want to dissolve my ego if it's part of my own survival. If you get what I'm saying. So that's probably where I'm gonna stop. Related terms to what I'm saying is suppressive persons. If you want to research that, suppressive persons may want to break you from getting into analytical mind. They want to knock you out of it or do worse. So if you watch my videos, please click like, comment, and subscribe.